So we'll go ahead and start here. We are a little smaller audience today, but that's all right. I blame Rachel and Keith for holding a drinking party last night. And how was the karaoke party? Was it good? Cool. Oh, man.
He's an angry atheist.
So we have a couple of things to talk about today. We have a couple of speakers. We'll just be real informal and, but think up some questions. I know I have some. And we'll do this for, of course, we're recording, right? So the people that couldn't be here today, that were too hungover, can go back onto the YouTube channel and get caught up. So first I want to say thank you to the volunteers. We've had a lot of things going on since we had our last meeting. Thank you. So this month, a few members of the atheist community of Polk County went to the Lights for Liberty event in Lakeland that was organized by the newly formed National Organization for Women chapter here in Polk County, as well as the Polk County Young Democrats. And, this is a grassroots coalition of groups that sort of came together nationally to put together this event on July 12th is a vigil to end human detention camps. So, we had somebody reach out, let's get involved, and we thought, well, rather than create our own thing, there's something else already going on, we'll just be a part of that. And that was good because it allowed us to go out and network with those people who are in those organizations, putting things on so that when things come up in the future, we're already connected. And they'll keep us in the loop and keep us involved. And so the main events were organized in El Paso and Homestead and San Diego. Anywhere the major facilities are operating that are keeping kids in these detention camps, right? And then all of these sort of smaller satellite events popped up to support the national events. So, we've been seeing a lot of reporting around the conditions that these people are being kept in, separated from their children. Children are taking care of infants. And regardless of what you might think about the immigration issue, right, I hope that we can all agree that the principles of democracy in granting all people human rights, the humanism, the life, liberty, and dignity, that's something that we should all be able to agree on, that whatever side of the aisle you fall down on how we should handle immigration, we should at least be treating people humanely, right? So thank you for all of you who came out to that. Then we had our first roadway cleanup. So we adopted a section of roadway, Old Dixie Highway in Auburndale. It's 2.2 miles, so 4.4 down and back, and we didn't even get anywhere near half of that. We were out for 3 hours. There were 8 volunteers, and we picked up 13 bags of trash. So this was a really trashed roadway that needed a lot of work. I have no idea how long it's been since anybody had ever cleaned it. It seemed like a really long time. So what we're going to do is we'll do every other week, every 2 weeks, we'll go out and do a cleanup. One will be in the morning, one will be in kind of the afternoon, evening before it gets dark. And once we get it done through one good pass, then we'll kind of be able to see and have an idea how quickly it's going to build back up and how much time we really need to invest in it on a monthly basis. So the next one is Friday, August 1st, and that's the one in the evening. I forgot that I had to thank you to the donors who bought us a clicker so that I don't have to do that anymore. So I talked a little bit last month. I kind of teased that we're going to kick off a fundraising effort at this meeting to support homeless and in-transition students at the Polk County Public Schools. So the Hearth Project and Polk County Public Schools are dedicated to assisting homeless and in-transition families and children by eliminating barriers to school enrollment, attendance, stability, and overall academic success. They work to ensure that children experiencing homelessness have the same opportunities for educational success as housed students in Polk County. So before we get into the main topic for today, we'd like to welcome Ben Ruch, who is the homeless coordinator with the Hearth Project, to talk a little bit about this issue of homelessness and how our students are impacted by that and what we can do as a community to come together and make a difference. Ben?
Thank you for, I'm not used to talking on the mics when I do presentations, so I'll get used to it. Thank you everyone for inviting me to come here. Sarah invited me to come here and share about the Hearth Project. Quite honestly, I look forward to being able to get out in the community and talk about what we're doing in the program because I really believe in it. I've spent 9 years helping students and families who are in homeless situations, 5.5 running the emergency family shelter for women, children in Lakeland, and about 3.5 years with the Hearth Project, which is the homeless education program for Polk County Schools. How many of you have ever heard of the McKinney-Vento Act? No, okay. So that's basically what we're doing in the Hearth Project. The McKinney-Vento Act it's a federal law that was put in place in 1987, and it was revised 2004 and again in 2015 under the Every Student Succeeds Act. The McKinney-Vento Act was put in place to ensure, kind of like Sarah was saying, to ensure that students who are experiencing homelessness are not having any barriers to having the same educational opportunities to the other students have who are housed. Because what they saw back in the 80s was that was happening. I can tell you firsthand that when I was working at the shelters, the families and the parents that I had the most challenging times trying to help get back on their feet were either parents who, and by that I mean helping parents get a job so that they could increase their income and, get back out into the world in their own housing and be able to sustain that. And the parents I had the most challenging time helping do so were either those who had a felony, but even more so those who didn't graduate high school. So I realized that education is really an important part of ending this cycle. And so this federal law, the McKinney-Vento Act, was put in place basically to make sure that all these needs are being addressed. So I'm going to get into a little bit about some of those needs, but first I want to kind of go into how the McKinney-Vento Act defines being in a homeless situation. And what it states is it's a student who lacks a fixed, regular, adequate nighttime residence. And so how that looks in Polk County is, or really any district throughout the nation, is the largest of those students, that population would be students who are doubled up, students who experience loss of housing for some reason. Maybe they were evicted, maybe it was due to a hurricane, domestic violence, parent incarceration, a parent passing away. Either way, they end up doubled up with friends or family. A lot of folks kind of think, oh, well, they're not homeless. They're in a house and they're with Uncle George or, their friend Billy. But I can assure you most of these doubled up situations are not ideal. We're talking, multiple families in a small home. We had a family one time that we went to visit to bring, I think, some food and some clothing, and we met with them in this kind of small living room that had doors that kind of closed, like, glass doors that had curtains over it. And it was a mom and her 2 daughters in that room, and they basically apologized for the fact that we had to meet in there, and we were kind of like, well, you don't need to apologize. And basically what they were told was they were allowed to live there, but there were certain times they could be out in the kitchen, certain times they could be using the restroom, certain times they could be basically visiting with the family. So it's the largest population, and ultimately it just compounds the problem. Second largest would be those in our budget motels. We have a lot of families who are living in motels due to loss of housing, and they're kind of stuck in an endless cycle because they can afford to pay the motel bill, but they can't save anything. And then shelters throughout Polk, substandard housing, which would be considered basically code violations. We have a large population that are in a homeless situation per the McKinney-Vento Act because they're in substandard housing, especially after Irma. We had housing that was already inadequate and, got much worse. Students who are living in campgrounds, there's about 50 camps throughout Polk. I think it's 50 or 51 camps throughout Polk, and you drive by them every day and wouldn't even know they were there. There's, I don't know of all 50. I know that there is 50. I don't know where all of them are. I know where some of them are, but again, you would drive by every day and wouldn't even know they're there. We didn't have too many families living in those camps in the past. It mainly was single, young, men and women living in there. And we're seeing more and more families, from what I'm being told by the folks who go out into those camps. They're seeing more and more families. So that's kind of what that population looks like. I have some brochures I would love for you to grab before you leave, because it does go into further detail about the definition and some other things that the federal law says. I know I only got 20 minutes, so I'm trying to hit the highlights. All right. The brochures, we are in a process. We put an order in to have some updated information, because the brochures I brought were from last year, so I will be getting some new information. But the only thing that's really updated on there is that's not on there that should be is we no longer do shoe vouchers through Payless because they went out of business. And this year's the number of students we identified this year is not on there, and I can share that with you now, which it's 3,725 students in Polk. And the brochure shows as of 15-16, there's over 75,000 students experiencing homelessness in the state of Florida. That's per the 17-18 school year, that's up to 95,000 students in the state of Florida. And so those are the main things that won't be in there, but other than that, everything else in there is the same. What do we do for these students? So what are the barriers? Enrolling in school can be very challenging for our families because they don't have the required documentation that the school board requires. Well, where the federal law comes in, it states that districts have to basically get rid of those barriers, because these families, these students aren't going to have, when we had families that came here from Puerto Rico due to Maria, they didn't have anything. They didn't have proofs of their residence. Some of them didn't have their birth certificates or school records. So are we going to let them sit out of school because they don't have that? No. If they qualify as being homeless in the school district, they have the right to be in school. And a parent, we encourage the parent to obtain said documents, but sometimes they can't. And regardless of that, they have the right to be in school under the federal law. So our office tries to do the best we can to train school staff. We have advocates at every school that identify kids to us. Identification is one area that our program can always do better at, because we rely heavily on the schools to refer families to us and students to us. And they, for the most part, they do a wonderful job. But that's the number I stated, the 3,725. We know there's more than that, so we're always going to do our best to grow in that area of identification. But yeah, so getting kids enrolled in school and fully participating immediately is our main concern, and that's what we spend a lot of time doing. Another aspect of what we do is keeping kids stable. So just to give you an example, I had a family last year that moved 8 times in the first 2.5 months of school. The zoning in Polk County is very interesting. It can be interesting, at least as far as how, what addresses are zoned for what schools. But 7 of the 8 addresses, I believe, were zoned for different schools. So what the federal law states is that students who lose housing and move out of zone can stay at their school of origin and receive school bus transportation. So if someone's living in a school or in a zone that's zoned for Kingsford Elementary in Mulberry, and they move onto Memorial Boulevard in Lakeland, because that's where the motels are that they can afford, they would have the right to remain at Kingsford and Mulberry and get bused through the Polk County Public Schools. There was a study done several years ago, and it was primarily military families the study was based on. But what they looked at was, some military families can be very mobile. And they looked at how far behind kids fell in school every time they moved. And what they determined was it was about 4 to 6 months every time they changed schools. But these are military families, so these are families that for the most part they might be moving a lot, but they're stable. The families that I'm talking about, they're they don't have that. I mean, they're experiencing homelessness. They're bouncing around, in some cases 7 to 8 times within the first couple months of school. So if they had to switch schools every time they changed locations, there would be no way that they would be able to succeed. For most of them, the school setting is where they get 2 of their 3 meals, or the 2 meals that they're going to get that day. It's where they have friends. It's where they're comfortable with teachers. And if we're uprooting them every time we move, there's no chance that they're going to pass that grade level. And then it's a snowball effect. They fall behind that grade, and then they, end up 17 years old in 9th grade and dropping out. So a lot of what we do is keeping that stability, and again, making sure that they have the same rights as any other student. Just kind of going back, I wholeheartedly believe that education is key for many of these kids to end that cycle that they're caught up in. And I see so many that do. I see so many that do. We have a senior luncheon for our students who are experiencing homelessness and graduating. And there was a young man there who I recognized, and I remembered him and his family had stayed at the emergency family shelter that I was the director of about 5 years prior. And so I went up and I ended up sitting with him at the luncheon and talking with him throughout. But his family, they were still living out of a budget motel. His mom unfortunately was unable to work. There was a lot of health issues. His dad had a stable job. It just wasn't enough to, get in their own housing. But here he was, graduating high school and going off to college. And I just think that's, Kathy had shared with me when I came in that there's a young man that she found living on a bench by a church. And so after kind of doing a little bit of investigating, she realized this young man, was falling behind in school, and the school really didn't have any clue as to what was going on. And so when she brought it to their attention, after maybe a couple visits.
We're trained with the Hearth Project.
Yes. So, but I guess getting connected through our office, we were able to assist and, get in touch with the school and make sure that those needs were being met. And if I remember correctly, did he go into the military?
He did. He graduated and he went into the military.
Right. But for as many of those success stories we have, there are kids who are falling through the cracks, and that's why we're just doing our best to be diligent to make sure that, we're trying to get across to as many of these kids as we can and find them as well. But I'm sure there's some things that I missed, but I want to make sure there's enough time if anyone has questions.
I'd never heard of the law. Have you found that, and so I assume that most of these student families don't know about the law, that they have these protections. Do you find that the Polk County school, officials, are they, trying to comply with the spirit of this and doing their best, or are they just kind of oblivious to it if they can?
No, they're not oblivious to it. And my predecessor, Dee Dee Wright, she was the homeless liaison for 23 years, and part of our program, our what we're tasked for is it was her job, it's my job to make sure our district knows. That's our primary responsibility. If the schools don't know, we're failing. I'm failing at my job. So we get out in the community, we distribute posters with the federal law and these brochures. We go around to soup kitchens, to the budget motels, to all kinds of places in the community we can so that the community knows about it. We did 15 poverty simulations at 15 separate schools, which if you're not familiar with the poverty simulation, I'll explain that in a second, but it's an amazing about 2.5, 3 hour training that we go into the schools and give to the school staff so they have a better understanding of what these students are going through. And throughout the training, we talk about the McKinney-Vento Act. So the district's not oblivious. Everyone's, for the most part, very supportive of what we're doing. I've consistently asked to present to the school social workers. I just presented to the mental health, the new position that was created because of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Act, the mental health facilitators they hired. There's 21 of them. I presented to them. I'm presenting to the elementary guidance counselors. I'm presenting to the librarians, The athletic director reached out to me. So there, I mean, if I contact all the department heads and say, hey, if you have a staff meeting, and I would love to be invited to talk about the McKinney-Vento Act and what we can help. I mean, they've been on board, so yeah, I'm pleased with how supportive they've been in that. But the poverty simulation, I just want to touch on that real quick. So it's about a 2.5-hour training, and you have to have about 55 to 115 participants, and most of the participants are broken down into families, and then they're in a picture. This is like a big cafeteria or gymnasium. And you have the families set up in chairs in the middle of the room, and then you have tables like this with businesses around the room. So some of the participants are also business people, the utility company, the employer, the pawn shop, the health clinic. And all these families have to go through 4 weeks. Each week is about 15 minutes. But they are given scenarios, and they're told what they need to do. And so they're given 4 weeks to basically keep their housing. So it really shows what it's like for low-income families, lack of transportation. Just shows how hard it is. And so we do this at schools, our schools. We do this for the community when we're able to. We're doing it at 2 colleges this year. And it's just an amazing training, and it really, I think it opens a lot of school staff, whether it be the teachers or the administration or the secretaries. I really feel like it opens their eyes to maybe that's why they're acting that way. Maybe they're just not coming in here all angry because they're just mean. Maybe it's because everywhere they go, they have to fight to get what they need to support their family. So,
any other questions? I have a comment that leads into a question, I guess, sort of. While we can't, we have to be careful politically, and we can't tell you who to vote for or how to vote. Let me say, you mentioned something about busing kids if they leave their zoned school and move and have to go somewhere else, that we are committed to busing those kids. If you haven't seen the news, we're perpetually short bus drivers year after year after year after year in the Polk County School District. And a lot of that has to do with the funding that comes voted on at the state level, what we can afford to do with our public schools. So it seems to me that, right, in the last election, we passed the half-cent sales tax extension. So it seems to me that the voters in Polk County are committed to public education and funding it and making sure that all of that happens the way it needs to. And then we have to go like down level up the stream and see who our elected officials are and what they're doing when it comes to public education and if that's helpful or harmful. And I will not comment on that thing.
Are there any public service advertisements or announcements, media, TV, to raise awareness?
yeah, so twice this past spring I was on the radio with Donna Renfro with Hall Communications. One time that was a radio interview. The other time I actually went down to the radio station. So we try to get on local radio. That's what I've done as far as local announcements, public service announcements is that, but I'm always happy to do it and look for opportunities to do it. But she typically, I think I get with her about quarterly, Miss Renfro, to make do some sort of interview for the local radio stations. So. And the Ledger contacts me or will contact us from time to time when they're doing a story about homeless education or maybe housing, and I try to comment when I can and when I'm educated enough to make a comment.
So how do you get the information to the students? Maybe if it's at
Good
management level, do you do anything to speak to the students at large or?
Yes. So one of the biggest ways families are able to become aware of this is every single enrollment packet that parents fill out for their kids in Polk County Schools has a student residency questionnaire in it. They can fill this out. All of those questionnaires come to our office. We identify them, and then we send, if the questionnaire is filled out to where it shows that they are in a homeless situation, we mail or send through our courier what's called a parent resource guide and Hearth introduction letter. It provides their rights under the McKinney-Vento Act, and it provides more about our program and what services we provide. So we send that to the school. So if we have a parent who has a child at Winter Haven High School, Westwood Middle, and Garden Grove Elementary, and they fill that SRQ out, they're going to get 3 parent resource guides, 3 introduction letters. That's how, how serious we are about making sure that they get this information. The schools also a lot of times will send those SRQs to us, and they'll also email us and say, hey, they filled this out, but I think they're going to need some uniforms, because our program, we help with the basic school needs. It's going to be hard for a child to succeed in school if they don't even have their school supplies and uniforms. So we also help with all of that. And again, I haven't really gotten into tons of the services we assist with, but they are all in that brochure.
I think that's a good place to tie in the drive that we're going to kick off. So folks will be able to make donations through us at the Atheist community of Polk County to support the Hearth Project. What are some things that you need from us? What are the biggest needs?
Okay. So we give out hygiene kits to all of our students, and we're doing pretty good with a lot of the hygiene items, but believe it or not, right now we're very low on the shampoo, conditioner, the bottles that have both. So that's one. We also we make up what are called sunshine boxes, and we give these out to primarily families who have had house fires, but in certain other circumstances, we give them out. And so we're kind of low on new towels. And that's one of the things we do give. We'll take any donation, don't get me wrong, but we kind of believe that giving, if we get a donation and it's used stuff, I find a home for it, whether it's a children's clothing closet in Lakeland or another place that needs it. But we try to give all of our students new book bags, new everything, because just because they're in a homeless situation doesn't mean they shouldn't get something new, just like any other kid who's going back to school shopping. So that's kind of our philosophy, how we look at it. But yeah, so new towels for these sunshine boxes. Believe it or not, a lot of the families at motels are charging more now for rooms with microwaves, and they can't afford it. So we are giving out crock pots. So we're always, we can always use those. One thing that we've noticed a need of is gas gift cards. Polk County is the size of Rhode Island, as you guys know, and transportation's hard. City busing's limited, and we do have 2 Hearth vans that we're able to transport kids to and from school while we're waiting on the district to create routes. But 2 buses for a county this large can only go so far. So we try to supplement that by giving our parents gas cards when we're able to. So those are some things I know right off the top of my head that we do need. We can always use school supplies, but if I were to prioritize it, we're doing a little bit better in that area than the others I just mentioned.
Great. Any other questions for Ben? All right. Thank you, Ben.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks for coming out.
Is that link active now? The donation link?
So I will tell you about that.
Should I turn this off?
There we go. Yeah, I got it. Thank you. Boop. Okay, so so the ways that you can donate. Right, Ben talked about some of the needs. If you have any specific questions, we can address those afterwards when we just hang out and chat here. But for some of the mechanics, right? So for the items that we collect, you can bring those to any of our events. If you come to a social, if you come to the educational meeting next month, and we'll try to wrap it up by next month's meeting. If you come out to the roadway cleanup, bring stuff there, and we'll collect it there. Since we don't have a home yet, at least, that's probably the easiest way. And if you want to get a hold of any of us, any of the directors, we'll be happy to make arrangements on getting with you and getting stuff picked up. If you donate if you want to donate cash, and you can definitely make a monetary contribution to this too. That's the question of what do you need the most changes, right? So cash donations help as well, and then they can just go use those to acquire whatever they need when they need it. So if you donate, there is a new link on the website that will be made active after the meeting, specifically to donate to the Hearth Project fundraiser. If you write a check, if you make a cash donation, please just write in the memo line or let us know that that's what it's for, so we make sure that it goes to that specific fund and not the general operating fund for our organization. So that should be, gosh, I don't want to update to the latest version of Windows. Why would I do that? Oh my gosh, and now it won't go away. Right? Leave me alone, Bill. Some of you got that. Good. Bless your heart. Okay, so you can donate directly to Hearth if you want to. We're not here to split hairs. We would like you to make your donations through our group so that we can, for a few reasons, but we'd like to be able to sort of track the interest in our community in certain projects and charitable efforts, so that when we move forward into the future and we're looking at different things to work on, that gives us a kind of pulse as to what you all are passionate about. And we will gather all of that stuff up by next month's meeting, and then we'll reach back out to the Hearth group and make, a presentation of all of the things that we've collected. Cool? Okay. So that brings us to our next speaker. Now, before I bring Kathy up, I just wanted to mention this is a very sort of public school-centric meeting today. And something that Allison and I talked about on the most recent Free Thought in Florida episode on YouTube is last month we talked about the letter that we sent on behalf of the atheist community of Polk County to Superintendent Byrd and to the school board over concerns with Gideon Bible distributions at graduations and prayers at graduations. And so when these violations of religious liberty and church-state separation stuff happen, we will definitely call them out, right? That is a big part of our mission and what we were designed to do, and give voice to those parents and students who are at the minority end of whatever that action was. But on the other side of that coin, right, the whole point of that is we support our public schools. We care about public education. And when they get it right, we'll call that out too, right? And so where they need help, like the Hearth Project, we'll be there. We've been very opposed vocally to the voucher expansions that have been happening for a variety of reasons, right? It sends taxpayer dollars into private religious schools. There's no oversight. And when students have performance issues in those environments, there's not a lot of recourse. There's nowhere for them to really go to have oversight. So, if you don't want your public taxpayer dollars supporting that, you should have a say in that. So another issue that we find ourselves passionate about when it comes to public education is whether our kids are being taught medically accurate, science-based, accurate information about a whole wide range of things. But today we'll talk about one specific of those things. And Kathy Dobson is here. She's the community outreach liaison / outreach educator and trainer with Planned Parenthood of Southwest and Central Florida. And she's going to talk with us about comprehensive sex education. I know, you thought Planned Parenthood was just all about aborting babies, but it turns out they do a whole lot more than that. Fake news. we know that they do a lot more in the realm of reproductive health care and from pregnancy and STD testing, contraception, and public education work like this. So we're going to talk about the state of sex ed in Polk County School District. You don't have to raise your hand, just in the back of your mind, do you think Polk County Public Schools are teaching sex ed with medically accurate, science-based information? We shall find out. Please join me in welcoming our guest, Kathy Dobson.
Thank you. Thank you. So I am probably what you could consider a lifelong resident of Polk County. I have been here since I was 3. I'm not going to tell you my age, but as you can see, I've got a few gray hairs in here. So I am a product of both private and public schools in Polk County. And just to give you a little bit of background, when I was in in schools in the 80s, they actually did have comprehensive sex ed. At some schools, it depended on the teacher, like it does today. It depends on the teacher that you get and what is taught in the schools. But one of the most surprising things that I learned when I became a sex educator in Polk County is that we really didn't teach comprehensive sex ed in the schools anymore. That it was abstinence until marriage, and marriage was between a man and a woman. And so you shouldn't be having sex until then. I am the member of several groups within Polk County, and one of the school liaisons who sat next to me, I explained this to her. I'm like, so how did we do such a shift in education to our youth? Because in the public arena, there are certain documents that say that Polk County is supposed to be teaching comprehensive, medically accurate sex information, but we don't. And I sat through, we had one of the teachers who actually do sex education in the Polk County schools. They came to one of the community members that I'm a part of, and she showed us what they actually teach in the schools. And so this is based on just information that I have had. It may not be 100% accurate, but I'm just telling you what I get as a sex educator for Planned Parenthood that does teach comprehensive sex ed. What they would do is they show pictures, or they show a PowerPoint, and they show the birth control method. So they would show birth control pills. Then they would show maybe an IUD. Then they would show a condom. So they actually had a picture with the word above it, but they are not allowed, according to the person who did this presentation for us last year, this was just last year, that they are not allowed to talk about the pros and cons or how to use any of the birth control. So they do get into talking about sexually transmitted diseases. And what happens is when they talk about the sexually transmitted diseases, they can tell you everything about the disease or infection or virus, but they don't tell you what you need to do or where you need to go to get help for that. So that's where I come in. And I have been teaching sex ed in Polk County for the last 17 years. Woohoo! So sometimes I feel like I'm the lonely only. And Polk County is as big as Rhode Island, which my boss can tell you my mileage records will show that. I could probably have traveled around the world by now. So, but Polk County is large, it is diverse, and a lot of places, especially in the past few years, have wanted to become more inclusive. They have also wanted to make sure that their youth are getting comprehensive, medically accurate information. So some of the schools that I do teach at regularly, I go to at least once a week. So I try to do a series of classes just so that everybody gets a basic background of what I do. I do a series of classes, and we go through everything. We go through relationships, what a healthy relationship is, how to talk to your partner about birth control, what STDs are. And in fact, this past summer, I spent the whole summer at one school doing parenting classes. But in my parenting classes, using those little computer babies, that's it. They love the computer babies. But what I love is in most places, they only get these computer babies one day. And they also get, the fun stuff about, prenatal and being pregnant, and then postnatal, wonderful. A baby is a wonderful experience. But what they don't get is the day-to-day, the nighttime, that you have to get up and feed the baby. You also have to change the baby when the baby's colicky. So we go through all of that. And then I talk about birth control. And they're like, oh my gosh, Miss Kathy, do you know that my boyfriend wouldn't get up in the middle of the night and help? Because sometimes, it's not just young teens that get this experience. So I try to do with partners if they're thinking about having a baby. And they really get to see what it's like. And more often than not, they're like, well, it was a really good experience, but I want to wait maybe 5 or 10 years now. Now I kind of get it. But I give them for the weekend, I try to give at least 3 days so that they can get a full experience. And this past weekend, out of the 15 babies, one came back with abuse shut down, which it was so abused that the baby actually just shut down because they just put it in a closet. They literally told me they put it in a closet, put it in a suitcase, wrapped blankets around it because they just could not stand the screaming anymore. I had an aunt call me and say, I don't know what you're teaching there, but I can't do this. I can't do this as a parent anymore. I didn't want to have a baby when I had my babies, and I definitely don't want to go, even if it's just for the experience. So that was just this past weekend. So the summertime for me is crazy. But normally what I do is I do go in and we talk about relationships and healthcare and how to access healthcare. I had a student actually just last month. She went to the emergency room for pink eye. I'm like, why are you going to the emergency room for pink eye? She goes, well, that's just where my mom tells me to go. Anytime she can drive, anytime that she goes to the doctor, she just goes to the emergency room for all of her health care. And many students, and even many young adults, if they don't have a primary physician in Polk County, that's the only place that they can get into to be seen. And so access to health care is a big thing for Planned Parenthood. We only do female and male reproductive health right now. But getting access to an OBGYN, just a gynecologist to get in to get birth control, we had someone donate quite a bit of money to us over the past couple years for women who could not afford a birth control device. I had a mom come in. She went to our Tampa Health Clinic. Sometimes I do work in the clinic. She came into the Tampa Health Clinic and she had 12 children. She has 12 children at home. She had 12 children at home then. And she explained to me that she just didn't, she was there for her checkup, but she couldn't get in anywhere else. She had drove 2 hours to get to Planned Parenthood. She lived, I don't know exactly, I don't even remember where she lived, but the neighbor was watching the kids. She drove 2 hours to get there. She was finally there. And we talked about birth control, and she's like, there is just no way I can get to like Walmart or anywhere. We have mail appeal programs, so we could mail you birth control. She's like, I just can't do any of that. She had never heard of an IUD. If any of you don't know what an IUD is an intrauterine device, and it can be put in place by a doctor or nurse practitioner. Some of them can be used for as long as 12 years to prevent pregnancy. This woman physically could not have children anymore, so that's why she was really terrified. She couldn't get pregnant. She didn't want to get pregnant anymore. Medicaid, for some reason, she didn't have Medicaid, and she just really couldn't afford an IUD either. An IUD can cost up to $1,500. And in many places in Polk County, if you go to a gynecologist, they don't stock those items. So they don't stock different types of IUDs. So if you come in for a visit, you may have to wait up to 2 weeks to get your device to prevent pregnancy. And in that 2 weeks, a lot of times women come back and they're like, oh, well, I got pregnant. So now what do we, so it's just a vicious cycle. Well, luckily we were able to, because of donations, we were able to give this woman a free IUD. She got it that day. And so hopefully, and she started crying. And to this day, just showing people a little kindness and understanding that, not everybody who comes through our doors has the money to even pay a copay. And that's why I do what I do. I go out and I do the education, because education, as I'm sure you know, like the Hearth Project, they actually educated me to where I can help other members in the community. It really is a community effort to talk to people, to have them understand what their basic rights are, what their basic needs can be, and how they can protect themselves, because so many children don't even know how to protect themselves. And they don't even know that, for example, that you can get condoms for free. You can get condoms for free at the health department, that you don't necessarily have to come into Planned Parenthood. What do you think the number one item is that is shoplifted at Walmart? Condoms. So I'm so thankful for those, those self-help places. I'm like, please do not get arrested for condoms. You can go through the self-line, and you can always get them free from the health department and myself at Planned Parenthood. But I know I don't normally do public speaking. I am more of a teacher, and I am very interactive. So does anyone have any questions specifically that I can help out with? Go ahead.
So Planned Parenthood's mandate is primarily reproductive.
Reproductive, social justice, making sure that our motto is care no matter what. So we are more into the medical aspect, but we also are into public policy. There are three kind of legs of a stool, if you can think of us. We're education, we're public policy, and we're healthcare.
So non-binary, non-standard.
Correct.
Do they engage in education or training?
So
do
especially
the schools
when
talk about that?
The schools, and I say this because some schools are different than others, but they are basically mandated to say that you cannot have sex until marriage, and that marriage is between man and a woman. Of course, me at Planned Parenthood, we are all genders, all relationships. We talk about partners versus boyfriend, girlfriend. We talk more so that it can be inclusive of everyone. We are a hate-free zone. We also do hormone replacement therapy, which a lot of people don't understand, and we don't discriminate against if you are female, transitioning to male. We don't get into any of that. Our doors are open to everyone.
But the school education, do they discuss non-binary?
They don't.
So
as far as I know,
the student is completely shocked when they bump into such a thing.
They are completely shocked, and in fact, if they ask a question about that, what I have been told is they are not allowed to really discuss anything like that.
And meanwhile, you've got a non-binary student in the class going, marriage until one man, one woman.
Right.
What the hell? Where am I reflected in this information?
Right.
Is a gay man marrying a gay woman?
No. No.
It's still not okay.
It's still not okay. No. Still not okay.
Can't be gay.
And I have to say, because some faiths let me come in and talk. So a lot of the different faith organizations around Polk County, they are actually understanding that being inclusive and being understanding of all people is where we need to be as a community, not just as Planned Parenthood, not just as an atheist group, but so I've actually seen a shift in the relationships that I have out in the community, and they're becoming more aware of that. But depressingly, in the schools, not yet. I think they've gone back to the 50s instead of even back to the 80s, which is sad to say.
I've noticed on CNN, their commercials, you'll see a lot of non-standard relationships in their commercials.
Right.
So they're trying to tell the public this is all right.
Right. Right.
I I was reading your brochure earlier. It said something about cancer screenings. What kind of cancer screenings do you offer?
So we do cervical cancer screenings for women or for someone with a vagina. So with a vagina. So we would do cancer, and we are actually one of the biggest organizations that do cancer screenings for people and in women's health care. So in reproductive health care, if that helps.
When you go into a school as a Planned Parenthood representative, are the administrators, like asking to see a syllabus or something that they can go, check mark? You can say this, you can't
Some
say
do.
this, you can't say this.
Some do. I teach evidence-based, medically accurate information. I do have a nursing background myself. So I make sure, and I've actually had nurse practitioners come out and follow me around to everything that I teach is medically accurate and is comprehensive sex ed. So I ensure that is one of my, as an employee of Planned Parenthood, that I pride myself in to make sure that everything is medically accurate and that students do get their questions answered, because a lot of times even some of the staff that teach sex ed in school, they really want to be able to answer questions to the students, but they're not allowed for one reason or another, based on political policies at that school or based on what the school board has told them. So one of the biggest things that we can do as a community is go to those school board health meetings and really advocate for comprehensive sex ed and say we really want this in the schools. We want, these youth to understand that a healthy relationship doesn't have to be between a man and a woman, that it can be between different people, and that's okay. That's okay. So that's one of the biggest obstacles that I have to overcome. And I really feel that working in the community and just having people see me teach. I often I've had a few parents over the years, not many, but I've actually, because people are like, oh my gosh, you teach in Polk County, how bad is it? It really isn't that bad. When I do community tabling events, or when I go and do a presentation, say at Polk Community College or Polk State or Florida Southern or one of the other local colleges around, I don't get negative comments. I mean, from certain people that I know in the community that are, it's basically from a very few. It's not from a majority of community members. And in fact, they come by and they say, hey, and I'll tell you this quick story. I was doing a tabling event with a Marine right next to me. And so I've been doing this for 17 years now. And I'm trying to get all of my stuff on the table. And he comes over and he goes, hey, can I help you out? And I'm like, sure. He goes, Miss Kathy, you don't remember me? You taught me like 10 years ago. Do you have any condoms? I just want to make sure I want to take them back and give them out to him. I'm like, yay, you're still doing safer sex. Woohoo. So, I guess from doing it for so long that sometimes I take for granted that we have such a wonderful community, and our motto is still care no matter what. And I really try to instill that into my students and to the people that I meet. Politically, I'm getting there. So I just got a new hat a few weeks ago that they want to turn me into a public affairs type of speaker. So I am so sorry. I really don't have any public affairs type of issues to present to you other than really comprehensive sex ed in the schools. That's the biggest. So that kind of transitions me from education to public policy. But.
Well, and on that note, a few things rattling in my brain, sort of the genesis of us getting together like this and talking about these issues is because this is something that we're concerned about in our schools. We want to make sure our students are given accurate, scientifically accurate, medically accurate information. And we are hopeful, we're an affiliate of American Atheists, and the former field director, national organizing director for American Atheists, was very involved in getting us up and going, and then unfortunately he left the organization, and so they've just now named the new field director, national organizer person, But the old one was super passionate about this issue and we're still in touch with him, so don't tell anybody. Sorry, American Atheist. But he has the game plan for how we organize, how we get together, show up at school board meetings, show up at in the public comments portion, and here's how you advocate to change these policies in our schools. So I'm sure we will be reaching back out to him at some point to learn from his expertise on this issue.
And there is a plan. There is a plan for that, because Planned Parenthood, that is one of our goals, is to make sure that comprehensive sex ed is in the schools.
Yep.
And I actually have I'm going to a 2-day seminar shortly so that they can actually teach the public policy people on how to bring this back to the communities and ensure that we get comprehensive sex ed, because it is, you believe it or not, we think that it's a majority of the people, but when you go to these school health committees and when you go into the schools, it's not a majority of people. They're so glad to have Planned Parenthood there. They're so glad that the kids can get all of these questions answered. But what happens is there's one person or two people that say, oh my, at the very top, or, on the school board, that say, no. This is stop. And you may have one vocal parent or two vocal parents, but then what we need from the community are all of those other parents that are like, oh, well, they teach this in the schools, so I don't have to talk to my kids about sex, or I don't have to talk to my youth about sex, or I don't really have to get involved and do anything because there's somebody out there. There's me. And I feel like there's only me. There's only me at these school board meetings. So, yeah, I'm very stretched thin there. And I was telling Sarah, a few years ago, we had over 26 educators in Central Florida. We went down to 2, and now we're back up to 5. So our area ranges from all the way to Daytona Beach, all the way down to Sarasota. So we are stretched thin, but we do try to give, especially the places that invite us in, that's why we try so hard to do a series of classes, because the relationships that you build with the students and coming back and seeing them year after year, that they can ask questions. My number one rule in my class is you can always cheat. Always cheat. And so they love that. So anything that we do is more interactive, it's more game-based, and they can ask questions. And I've had kids call me, I've had them text me, I've had them show up at the clinic, and I'm never at the clinic because if I'm at the clinic, I'm generally not working. They send me to the clinic in Tampa or Orlando, but it's just such a wonderful organization to work for, and I wouldn't be there if it wasn't. I've been there for 17 years, and I just can't say enough that they really do go out of their way, not only for staff, but for the general population to do good. So
be prepared. There will come a time in the future, I promise you, when the call will go out, hey, this conversation is happening in the county school board level, at the state level, so we talked very early on about the ACEs program that we adopted from American Atheists, which is activism, community, education, and social. So this is the beginnings of that. This is education, right? We're at the educational meeting, so that we know better the issues before us. And then we'll tie all of that stuff back in together with community service. If there are ways that we can partner with Planned Parenthood in the same way that we're partnering with Hearth and other things that we've been doing, and we can get together for social mixers and get the people who are supporting Planned Parenthood mixed in with our groups so that we're building relationships and networking and knowing each other. So then when it comes time to do the activism and show up and speak out, we have a team connected already. We have the people in place and all connected that are in the right connections to go out and do this activism that will need to be done in order to make sure that our schools are teaching this information correctly. I will also say that a lot of that is tied to state law. So it's not just the local issues. I've tried to get Brendan Hott from the Florida Citizens for Science to come out and talk to us, but he declined because they're struggling in their organization. If anybody wants to help run a 501c3 and you don't want to help us, you can go help them. They need it, but they advocate for science literacy in our public schools, and that's their primary mission. And so he's talked a lot in recent years about the challenges of teaching evolution as the scientific knowledge that we know that it is. And we recently had that bill where anyone in the community, regardless of whether they had students or not, could come in and challenge what was being taught in public schools in science. And so there's a lot going on at all different levels that we need to be keyed in on. And that's just to say, we can get the school board where we need the school board to be, but if the state legislature is not where the legislature and the Department of Education is not where we need them to be, so much of it is driven from above too.
But see, that's where people have a misconception, because in our laws today, Polk County is supposed to, and I'm sorry if I didn't say that before, but Polk County is supposed to be comprehensive sex ed and medically accurate. So it's already written into law. It's just getting the school board to comply and actually follow the rules that they've already been given. But each county in Florida, it's up to the school board to determine what is taught, what curriculum is taught in the schools. And right now, if I didn't say so already, but between the grades of 9 to 12, they get 1 day. They get 1 day of education. They get 1 day of sex ed. That's it. That's all they get. And, and mental health, believe me, I am all for mental health, because so often I see in the schools that mental health is such a needed, but they used to have a life skills class that was actually required, and they got a whole semester of different, like healthy relationships, mental health, comprehensive sex ed, and it's just not required in the schools anymore. Yes.
This 1 day of sex ed, is there a test at the end or any way
Nope.
to measure whether or not any of this has landed?
No, and in the past, they have a questionnaire that they give out to students every couple of years. And in fact, Polk County for a few years didn't even want to put questions in like, are you having sex? Are you using protection at all? Are you using birth control? Because they're like, why should we know that information? This is a direct quote from someone on the school board who was helping fill out those questionnaires. Is, why do we want to know that information if they're having sex or not?
There's no metrics at all. You don't get a grade or anything. There's no way of affirming or disconfirming that you have learned this?
No.
Do they give you a reason why they object to teaching it, or?
It's not that they object to teaching it. I honestly think that Polk County is going through a transition, and with community members like this right now, talking about it and coming forward and in those school board health meetings and talking to the school board, that the more and more that our voices are heard, because they just think that we're a minority. They think that, that's a controversial topic. Parents want to teach that at home. They don't want us to get into this, because a lot of people who think that comprehensive sex ed shouldn't be taught in the schools really believe that if you talk about sex, that the kids are going to want to go and have sex. They really feel that way, and I have talked to, and there's nothing wrong in thinking that way until you learn that that's not true. It's just not statistically true. If you teach youth to use safer sex methods and to be healthy, to have healthy relationships, first of all, that it actually delays the start of sex for youth, and it gives them better relationships. And that's what we really need to, I think, that focus on, and that when you do get into a relationship, it doesn't matter whether you're 18 or 25, that when you do get into a relationship, that you know how to be a parent when you want to be a parent. Not just when, oops, It's today.
And on the note of statistics, also, we know that students who receive this accurate information, the trend over the long haul is all of the things that we complain about, the detriments that happen, STD rates drop when students are given accurate information about sex. Teen pregnancy decreases. Unwanted pregnancies decrease. All of those societal things that we like to, maybe not we, but that folks in society, abortion rates drop, absolutely. The solution to all of those problems is just give them the information that they need to know so that they can make safe and healthy choices as they go. Look, they're going to have sex. So we need to arm them with the information that they need.
And it used to be one youth between the ages of 10 and 14 was getting pregnant in Polk County every week. I mean, every week. Think of that, 10. And I know of a youth as young as 9 that had to give birth. And you know that at 9 it was not consensual. It was not. And even at 10 and 11 and 12 that there are things that are going on, so people think, oh, well, so if a young person goes in to a clinic, there's actually no age to go in to get medically accurate information about safer sex. And what happens is when these youth go in to any doctor, it's not just Planned Parenthood, but they can go into anywhere. It used to be that they had to be at least 12. But they're finding that even in Polk County that we've dropped the rate from once every week to once every 2 weeks. So that's just Polk County. And no, we don't want youth between the ages of 10 and 14 getting pregnant, or, not when they, but so we're coming over those hurdles as a community. I do have, if you all want, but these are sign-up cards to get information about what we do in the community, specifically Polk County, and they send out and it will be me coming up in a few months, but you'll get a message of what's going on in Polk County and how you can help.
Great. Thank you. Well, we'll go ahead and finish the presentation sort of portion, and then we can chit-chat a little bit. But I want to thank you, Kathy, and Ben also for being here with us today. Appreciate you coming out. Now I have to upgrade my Windows again. One more thing that I will say very briefly is part of what we're doing to sort of help prepare for the need to go in and have these conversations with the folks who set the curriculum is that educating ourselves on what the curriculum is. So as parents, we go to our you can go to your school and make the request of show me what the curriculum is, and they'll generally show it to you. Sunshine State laws, all that stuff's public record also. But one of the things that we learned from Jim back when this whole thing started was doing it that way helps. Again, everything is in relationships, right? So that helps you get to know your administrators, and if you're making contact with the school board, and so you're having dialogue and communication. So then when you come in and say, hey, I got a problem with the way you're teaching something, you're not going to go in guns blazing. It's not going to be confrontational. We already know each other, and we're going to just sit down and have a conversation about it. So that's something that's kind of been in the planning works the last few months too. We want to thank our donors. I try to keep this updated from straight 1 month to the next month. So if you don't see your name up there, complain to me and I will make sure that we thank you. If you don't want your name up there, talk to me and I'll try to remember not to put it up there. Yeah, absolutely. That's not what the first one, that's not a pseudonym. And then, again, look at how much this has grown. I think all of you, with the exception of our speakers, have been to pretty much almost every meeting now. And if you remember, it was like 6 or 10, and then it was 15, and then 25, and now Keith's photo project, Faces of the Faithless, or anyway, that's a story for later, is growing. He went to the Orlando group, the Central Florida Free Thought community, and got some more shots there. And the idea is just to kind of travel around Florida. Really, it's kind of grown in scope and get pictures of people who don't believe. And it's a great visual representation of, hey, listen, there are a whole lot more of us out here than you probably think there are. It's a good signal to those in the community who may be looking for community, who may be looking for people that are like them. And I think my favorite thing about the way this sort of worked out, because it's just kind of been just changing as it grows, right, is that if you don't want your picture, you can use the silhouette option. And I think the message behind that of, hey, listen, it's not safe for all of us to be out and proud and loud about, hey, we don't believe in any gods. That there is still a stigma attached to being an atheist in our culture, and a lot of people might have a job that if their boss found out, they could get fired. That would affect them negatively. So anyway, I just love this, and it's growing and growing and growing. And if you haven't done it yet and you want to, Keith has his stuff set up here. And we're going to be at Free Flow in November, the Free Thought Florida Conference in Orlando at the Holiday Inn Airport, I believe, which is going to be huge. Matt Dillahunty, Aaron Ra, Seth Andrews, a lot of the big names in atheism will be there. There's some really great local speakers. Brandon Hott, that I talked about from Citizens for Science, will be speaking. So if you can get to Free Flow, we absolutely would love to see you at Free Flow, and that's freeflow.org. But I can give you more information about that afterwards. But Keith will be set up there taking pictures as well. The Atheist. Yeah, Seth Andrews, that's going to be great. Then we can play the game Find Seth. Be like, where's Waldo seeking Seth or something? And the atheist community of Polk County will have a booth set up. We still need to talk about how that works for volunteers to work the booth. But we'll talk about that later and how we're going to staff that, because we're not going to be able to be at it all day long. And there's only 4 of us, but there's really less than that because we all have kids and somebody's got to watch the kids. And I'm emceeing Free Flow, another big announcement. So I'm going to be busy introducing people and killing time on stage. So anyway, we'll talk about that in a little bit. Our August educational meeting, we'll have Melina Reyna Barrett as our guest speaker. She is an LGBTQ and women's rights activist, advocates for the separation of church and state. And we actually bumped into her at the Lights for Liberty event that we went to a couple of weeks ago. So I'm looking forward to hearing what she has to say and teach us all. So that will be Saturday, August 24th at 2 p.m. Here at the library again with Melina Reyna Barrett. And thank you all for coming. I'll shut the video down and we'll have some chit chat. Thank you again to Kathy and Ben for coming out here for us and great presentations. Thank you.